Good evening, everybody. Welcome here tonight to another Chamber on Tap here at the palatial back room of the Great Canadian Brew House. I want to thank Frontline Financial for being our sponsor here tonight. Thanks, Dean. Yeah, big round of applause. He's here just for the food, I think. That's it. That's a good plate. You got a good plate going on there. Our guest here tonight, I call him Mr. Spruce Grove, but I think that actually probably should be Mr. Parkland County, the Tri-Region. For 30 years, he has really done it all here in Parkland County, from being a reporter for the Rep X, to doing media for the Saints, to coaching Special Olympics. Just an absolutely fantastic human being and a great part of our community. Please welcome Gord Montgomery. So you say you're from Weyburn. What made you come from the beautiful town of Weyburn, may I say, all the way up here to Spruce Grove in Parkland County?
It's a bit of a long, convoluted story, but to make it short, I went to college in Lethbridge for a couple of years. I worked there for a while, decided to go back to school and had to come up to Edmonton to take the schooling that I took at Grant MacEwan. As it turned out, I moved to Spruce Grove rather than Edmonton. And back in the day, Spruce Grove was a really small community, nice community. Weyburn was a small city. Spruce Grove was a small town at that time. And I just loved it here and just never left it.
We should say you were a writer for 30 years, but that's not what you went to school for.
No.
What were you in school for?
I went in Lethbridge. I took physical education and recreation management. Discovered that recreation management was really political driven, and apologies to Wayne Roth, I'm not a politically oriented guy, so I kind of strayed away from that field. Then I came up to Edmonton to take graphic arts. Went through that, got my diploma or whatever there after a couple of years, and never ever did anything in that field because I wasn't cut out to sit behind a desk. Worked for the RCMP part-time and coached baseball at that time. Was coaching the highest level of all in town. And the RCMP job, I guarded prisoners at night, drunk guys from the community and that type of thing. Not mentioning any names.
Anyone in this room?
No, not that I see anyway or recognize. It allowed me to get away to play baseball because I didn't have to go to work every day, or not play baseball, or coach baseball. From that, I began writing stories for the newspaper. The gentleman that was doing the sports at that time knew next to nothing about baseball, so I figured I'd give him a hand. And I had an ability to write as a kid, just never realized that I could do something with it. Put those stories in the paper, and from there just applied when the sports job came up because I wasn't doing anything full-time. I just got married. So 12 days after Janie and I got married, I became a reporter at the newspaper.
30 years as a reporter, a lot of changes over 30 years. We were kind of talking that before the interview here tonight.
I don't like change.
He doesn't like change. How has your writing changed, though? Obviously, as time goes on, you obviously adapt to different styles, maybe, or different type, or see what the trends are as far as writing, or you just kind of you kept learning every time you wrote an article.
I think I learned every time. I'm self-taught. I didn't take journalism. I didn't have anybody telling me how to do it. This is the way to do it. One of the best compliments ever paid to me was from a friend, and he said, reading your stories is just like talking to you. And to me, that was the biggest compliment anybody could have made, and I've always kept that in the back of my mind, that I'm relating somebody's information to other people, and I want to tell that person's story, so I'm always going to give the person as much time as they want. It's not all going to get in the magazine that I write for, or the newspapers that I used to write for, but they're telling me their story, and therefore I have to give them my respect and my time to listen to what they have to say.
2002 Olympics, of course, we had pros playing hockey. And if anyone knows Gord, you know that you're not a huge fan of the professional game. You definitely prefer the junior and the amateur players. What is it about the amateurs and the juniors and like the Stony Plain Eagles that really give you that sense of this is truly hockey rather than the professional game?
There's a couple of things. The first of all, I think, is the sense of community that these guys take. Whether or not they live in the community, they realize they represent the community. And because of that, they take the community to heart. And that's a really good thing. I was lucky enough to do the writing for the Spruce Grove Saints website this year. And talking to these kids after games, you could see that they were proud to pull on that jersey and to play for that hockey team. The same with the Stony Plain Eagles. They've had a few rough years here. They're getting it back together. But those guys too are proud to represent that community. And we saw during the 90s when the Eagles were the team to beat in senior AAA hockey in Canada. A lot of the guys that played for that team that were living in Edmonton moved to Stony Plain and are now residents of Stony Plain or residents of Spruce Grove. So that's pretty neat.
You've had a chance to see a lot of players, not just on the Saints, but with football and baseball develop their careers. You have a great story about Stu Barnes. Well, no, when he got drafted, one of the first people he called was you. How did that feel when you get that phone call?
You know what, when you're a big-time reporter and you work for a daily, you get to go to these things called the NHL draft and the CFL draft. I got to sit in my basement and watch it on TV. I'd follow, Stewie's another guy that I'd followed from a young age. I think I picked him up when he was about 13 or 14 playing local minor hockey here. And this was a kid on a mission. 10 minutes after he was drafted, put on the hat, put on the sweater, took the pictures. The phone rang. It was Stu Barnes. And he said, hi, I got drafted. Did you see it? And it was so cool. It was so exciting to have him at that moment reach out to me from a little paper and say, I've got time for you.
No, I mean, it goes to show what a community can do, whether it be paper, radio, any type of events. We have effect on these people, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that you'll have a lasting friendship for the rest of your lives, which is just fantastic.
I should say that I don't usually talk about this, but I used to always wonder if people read the newspaper because you don't get much feedback. And you being in radio, I don't know, you guys are high profile, so you probably get lots of feedback. You don't hear what you're doing. You hear if you do something wrong, if you spell somebody's name wrong, it's the end of the world and this type of thing. When you're doing well, you don't get a lot of feedback, and it took me 29 3/4 years to realize that at the paper. So I never knew what I was doing, if it was any good, and I used to think, should I be here? Am I having any impact? Are people reading this stuff? And my dear wife, who keeps coming up in this conversation, she's much smarter than I am, always said, you have a bigger impact than you know. And that's, I think, that young reporters, young people in the communication business have to realize that they do have a real impact on the community, whether or not they hear it.
And you had a chance to see not just the high-profile sports, but all sorts of different types of sports. What I think was really cool about that too, there wasn't really not a sport you wouldn't want to go cover.
There were a few, but we won't bring it up.
You covered curling.
Yeah, no, I covered everything because that was my mandate, was my responsibility. There were some that I didn't spend as much time at, shall we put it, and more got better coverage because I liked them more. But yeah, everybody got their share.
Arm wrestling, that to me was a sport that you never really hear about. But man, we had some successful people here in Spruce.
Huge amount of successful people here. A gentleman that's passed away by the name of John Maya-Dazik actually brought it into the forefront in Spruce Grove. And we had, I think at one time, 3 world champion arm wrestlers here. And I mean, I'm talking the world. I'm not just talking Canada or US. We're talking beating people from Russia, from the Ukraine, that type of thing. And they were all great people. Just a sport that nobody knew anything about, and it was fun to bring it out into the open.
Golf, definitely one of your passions. And what I think is just absolutely fantastic is that you're involved with the Special Olympics and teaching them how to golf. I mean, number one, what got you involved in that? And number two, tell us the feeling you get when you are out there with those Special Olympians and you see them hit a ball for the very first time, or maybe make their first putt and sink the ball.
And this is emotional for me, but it goes back to Weyburn again. And when I grew up, I graduated from high school, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Wasn't really smart enough to go to university, and I knew that. Plus, I didn't want to spend another 4 years in school. Maybe not the best decision I ever made in my life. Decided I was going to go to college, but I chose to work for a year, and the place I chose to work was a psychiatric institute. Weyburn had a huge, what we called a mental hospital back in the day, and I was lucky enough to get assigned to a job in the psychiatric ward with chronically ill patients, patients who were never going to be released. And I saw a different part of the world. I saw people who were happy for the moment, saw no future, had no future. And it just kind of made me fall in love with that. And that sounds strange, but they were good people, and there's stories I could tell you, but they couldn't go out in public because they're funny, but they're funny. From there, I went to college in Lethbridge, and like I said, I took recreation and had the advantage to work with special needs kids for one of my courses there. Kind of kept me active in that. I graduated, I worked with juvenile delinquents in the Juvenile Delinquent Center for about 6 months before I burned out on that. But I've always had this interest in working with Special Olympics. Sat on the board here. Used to be called Forever Green Special Olympics, and I was on the board there for I think 3 or 4 years before I got too busy with my job and had to forego that pleasure. I've always enjoyed writing about the Special Olympic athletes here, and again, we have world champions from here. John Good won a swimming gold medal in the World Championships. A young man named Evan James is just off to the World Championships next fall. Just a wonderful guy. And enjoyed the rapport I had with those kids, those athletes. I heard that Special Olympics was going to bring golf into the program here, and they needed some help. And I'm not a great golfer. I can play okay, but I'm not going to break par. I never expect to. I have fun when I play, and that's what I wanted to do with the kids of the Special Olympics. Well, they showed me what fun is all about. These guys don't care if the ball goes 5 feet or 150 yards. If they move it, that's a great day right there.
We're going to come to it and wrap up things here. Obviously, you're a person with tremendous passion for what you do. That's why you've been so successful. Advice to a young entrepreneur, advice to somebody who's maybe just starting out in a field or wants to branch out something. What is the key to success in your mind?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Learn from other people. Copy if you have to. Nothing wrong with copying somebody. I had a kid come up to me once, worked at the Lloydminster paper, told me that he copied my style. That was a compliment because imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And if you're looking for mentorship, if you're looking for leadership, don't be afraid and go ask somebody. I think in your business, what you need to do to become better. If they brush you off, fine. There's another person that's willing to help you. Just go out and cut your own path and ask lots of questions because you have to take some chances. When you do take chances, more often than not, you're going to be successful. If you're not, just start over.
Great advice. Great advice. Gord, it's been an absolute pleasure here. You and Jane are two of the nicest people I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and your effect and your impact on our communities, don't ever undersell yourselves for what you guys do, because it's our communities are better because of you two. So thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure here having you tonight. You're welcome.